the fallout of the Donald Trump conviction. Over the weekend, I was in the mood to kind of reset. This was in the aftermath of the Glock store event, where we saw so many listeners and supporters and people from all across these hills and valleys of the great state of Tennessee and beyond. And I didn't ask every single person their political affiliations, but they volunteered them to me, in as much as we were having conversations, it invariably went to the conviction of Donald Trump. And it created in me, in the aftermath of the event, as I was driving home, I kind of had a grand reset in all of this. Because I admit that I was bothered. I didn't really have an ability to pinpoint what was bothering me the most on Friday, which is why I'm somewhat glad that I had a few days to decompress on it. But I find myself at such peace with where we are in our country. There is a clear distinction now between those that want to go toward more government control in Washington, D.C., and those that do not. Those that believe that there are groups, whether they know this or not, this is what they're arguing for. They're arguing for nanny state. Now, the liberal left, the leftist in the United States, the statists, we'll call them, they have an ability to hide what they are doing behind the boogeyman that has become Trump. But if you use the brain that God gave you, if you use your ability to reason this out and rationalize this out, you will understand that they will not take away some of the things that they have learned to do over the course of the last 8 years or so. Once Donald Trump is no longer in the picture, those things will continue, and those efforts will continue. And what are those efforts? Those efforts are to centrally control the American people. Isn't that what we're discussing? How much responsibility and how much liberty should be, because those two things go hand in hand, how much should be left to the states or to the people individually versus how much control over our daily lives are we willing to give to the government of the United States of America in the form of the bureaucracy and the politicians that supposedly run it, which I don't necessarily believe, but I'm just work with me, okay? This is the fight that we are engaged in. It is not a pro-Trump or anti-Trump fight. It is a fight over how we are going to live our lives with regard to who gets to make the decisions. As I was watching some of the Anthony Fauci testimony this morning, I recognized how universal this concept truly is amongst all of these conversations that we have. And Donald Trump is truly not a part of the conversation when it comes to Anthony Fauci, the NIH, the CDC, and these other alphabet soup organizations that attempted to control and ultimately destroy many of our lives and livelihoods during the COVID pandemic era because they insisted that they knew better than the average people that were just trying to get along on their day-to-day activities, and they were being prevented from doing so because the CDC and these other alphabet soups demanded that they comport themselves in a certain manner, in a certain way, and if you did not, you would be fully subjected to the weight of the federal government, the bureaucracy, and the law enforcement arms that they have at their disposal. In other words, what I would suggest to you that COVID and COVID-19, and I don't pretend that Donald Trump made all of the right decisions during that, because I think he was caught a little bit flat-footed as the rest of us were. He was in the midst of fighting a battle over ultimate control against the bureaucracy at the time that COVID came up. So he was fighting these establishment bureaucracies that believe that they act exterior to the Constitution of the United States of America. He was in the midst of fighting the NSAs and the FBIs and these other intelligence agencies that Bob on Friday told me that I'm not allowed to talk about because I don't know what I'm talking about. Well, tell me what I'm wrong on. I'm not talking to you. I'm not telling you that information. Wait, So you're telling me I'm not allowed to speak about the FBI because I don't know what I'm talking about, and I ask you to inform me about what I should be talking about, and you tell me that I don't need to know because what? I don't belong? That's the attitude of Bob represented, I don't know who this dude is, but he represented the attitude of the federal government better than I ever could. You just do what you're told. You do it because we tell you to do what you're told. And when we tell you to change what you're doing and do something different, you don't question that either. You don't ask questions. You don't ask why. And it occurred to me as I was reflecting on this and I was reflecting on the Trump verdict, the political left, they are telling us to accept what the government does to us without any questions. They are truly treating us like children. They believe that not only should you do what the government tells you to do and do not question their motivations or their rationale, but you do so in a way where not only should you act compliant, but you better be happy about it. Now, this is not to say that this has gone to the states necessarily, because some states are better than others. And certainly, this is not being accepted by the people of the South, I would suggest. But there are broad swaths of the United States of America that have bought into it. Now, some of them are useful idiots in as much as they just buy into this concept that Donald Trump is the evil, that those that want you to believe that he's evil have suggested that he is. Donald Trump is a tool for them. He is a symbol for many of us, and he's a tool for them. And in that way, the rules of normal political behavior don't really apply to him. And here's what I mean. The leftists are regularly amazed, have been regularly amazed over the last 8 years that they can't get to Trump by any conventional means. The normal things that the political left, the normal playbook that they have used to destroy effective politicians on the right, they've not worked. Typically, I mean, the playbook is pretty simple for these people. Take what they say and what they believe out of context, mischaracterize it, and use the power of emotional garbage in order to destroy them, i.e., they want the Handmaid's Tale for women because they're pro-life, or they want to subjugate women and put them back into the kitchen, or they want to kill gay people, or all this nonsense. And if that doesn't work for typical conservative politician, they then move on to the politics of personal assassination or personal character assassination, which they also did with Donald Trump. Oh, they play the hypocrite game, too. I forgot about that. Where he said this 5 years ago and he's saying this now. He's a hypocrite, and conservatives hate hypocrites and all of that. And they use the useful mainstream media at every step of the proceedings for their own purposes. Then they move on to the politics of personal character assassination. He had an affair back in the day. He said this thing or that thing. He was caught on tape, the Billy Bush tape, et cetera, et cetera. Then they accuse them of being like agents of the left, that they are Manchurian candidates and these sorts of things, which they did during the first stages of the Donald Trump presidency, and none of it worked. None of it worked. Why? I believe for those of us who support Donald Trump, he represents something greater than himself, and I've been saying that for a long time. What I have not connected is how he represents that thing, how people consider him to be that representation of a government grown too large, of a bureaucracy that is too controlling, of an institution or multiple institutions that have become uncontrollable by the consent of the governed. And so we sent him with a simple message. Get this crap under control. Get the bureaucracy under control. Get the regulation under control. Get our borders under control. Get shrink government back to its appropriate and constitutional roles and levels. And Donald Trump succeeded in some of those things and failed in other things. And it was believed that given another 4 years of continuous service to the United States of America, that he would go a long way in what he would call draining that swamp. What we saw last week in the verdict in this trial, and I understand that it was a hand-picked jury, and I understand that that's of concern to many of the American people, but I don't think the selection of that jury led to the verdict that the jury gave. I think the selection of that judge did. It's far less an indictment on the jury in as much as it's an indictment on the judge. That's a part of the system. That judge was hand-selected. Normally, it is a random selection process. This judge was not randomly selected. This judge was personally selected by the department. Why? Because the political left looks at Trump ultimately in the same way. And they consider him useful toward their purposes because they can create in him a boogeyman that avoids the real issue. The real issue is not the boogeyman Donald Trump. The real issue is the boogeyman in Washington, D.C., in the form of the bureaucracy, which is a lot more difficult to define. Which is why I would suggest that our election in November is not about any verdict that happened last week, and I don't think it will be. It is very much about what type of country you want to live in. One that has the ability to tell you the manner in which you're going to comport yourself in your daily life and what you're allowed to express or not to express. If they can tell a sitting United States Supreme Court justice that they are not allowed to express themselves politically on their property with their flag, how the hell do you think if they are given the ability they're going to treat you? They'll put you in jail, bro. You don't think they won't? The political left, the government bureaucracy that runs them, they have demanded that no less than three sitting Supreme Court justices recuse themselves from our American constitutional process because of their political viewpoints or because of the political viewpoints of their family members. You don't think they'll do that to you? I believe it is a choice between freedom and control. And so I come to this conclusion, and I know I have to wrap up, Belle. This finishes my rant, and you can tell me if it made any sense or not. 615-737-9986. All of us have been asking on talk radio circles, in podcast circles, on social media websites, etc., what this verdict will mean. Will this mean less voters for Donald Trump, more? I don't think this verdict will have one bit of impact on November. I don't. I think it will fade into obscurity in the same way that Billy Bush has, in the same way that Stormy Daniels did, in the same way that Russian collusion did, in the same way that Ukrainian impeachment did. Donald Trump did not lose 2020 for any of those reasons. Donald Trump lost 2020 because of the real level of control that the federal government truly has, and that's COVID. Whether they created it or not, whether it was weaponized or not, whether it was intentional or not, the political left used COVID to steal the 2020 election. Tell me I'm wrong. Back in a moment on Super Talk.